Well, good evening. Good evening. Appreciate everybody taking your time tonight to come out. This is Town Hall 2026. I'm Vic Carpenter. I'm your county administrator. And I want to point out and welcome that I have 6 members of my county council here tonight. 7th would have been here, but she's out of the state. This was publicly noticed, but this is not a meeting of the county council. It's my opportunity to talk to the citizens about where we are as a county, progress that we've made, and as we look forward into the next budget season, some things we're looking at doing. So it's kind of a checkpoint, give you a chance to kind of listen and maybe hopefully understand some of the headway we've made and some of the opportunities that we have in front of us as well. So I kind of want to start, get this right thing, with, what did we do? Last year we did town halls. We said all the things that were going to happen. I'm going to go into some greater detail on all these. But what you'll see happen the last year is that, first of all, the county made significant investments in equipment, especially for public safety. Last year we bought ambulances, fire trucks, sheriff's vehicles, and public safety equipment. That was something we did last year. Also something that was, we completed an audit on time, which was a big thing. We made that commitment to our community that our audit would be in on time this year. And it was. It came in. We recently, as part of something we started, scored a significant victory in Columbia with the Department of Environmental Services on our new wastewater treatment plant. And I'll talk about that a little more as well. But we began the work on this sewer connector. And of course, I'm sure most people have driven down 321 or Peach Road at some point and seen all the work that's underway. Well, we're almost done. And a year ago, we were saying we would be done on time. And right now, everything looks like we will be done by the end of June, as we said we would be. And that's going to be a critical part of where we're going in the future. Of course, we were talking last year a lot about the nuclear plants, and what's going to happen. And things really happened this past year. So I'm going to touch on that. One of the little things that just kind of was always there is all this property the county has, this old building and that piece of land and what we're going to do with it. So we began a process for determining what properties we had we didn't need, and then were we going to get rid of them, and if we were, how we were going to do that. We also, one of the commitments we made was to do a strategic plan. So last year, this time, we were talking about we're going to do a plan. Well, proud to say that we finished that plan. It got approved by the council, and we'll be going forward now with implementing that. And then we also did the housing study that was completed 2 years ago. Well, now we're in the process of getting it approved as well, so we can then act towards that. So those are some of the big things that happened last year. And let's go a little more into detail, into the capital improvements. First thing we did is we created a capital improvement fund. And there was a lot of angst over that, and it had some pain attached to it, and we know that. But what that did, what that has allowed us to do and is going to allow us to do, is invest money in the equipment that our public safety, our public works, our county employees has to use to make sure that this county does the job you expect them to do. As we had vehicles with 300,000 miles on it. Earlier today, we heard the sheriff saying that he doesn't know when was the last time they didn't have a conversation where they had a transmission blown in a vehicle. And with public safety vehicles, I see Mr. Martin there, and I see the chief. You can talk 2 to 4 years before you get a piece of equipment that you order today. So having a long lead time is critical. So we started purchasing that kind of equipment. And several new ambulances have already come in. Several new fire trucks have come in. Between last year and the new budget, we'll be talking about 18 new sheriff's vehicles as well. Work at the animal shelter. Excuse me. Putting in camera systems. Excuse me. Putting in a new camera system, as well as some significant work on the drainage, the power, and the water that goes to all the outside runs. So those are all things that we have started in the budget that we were talking about last year. Well, let's go a little more into some of the stuff we did. As we talked about where we were financially, and again, we completed an audit on time. And that's a big thing. It's a big thing for this county especially. And we're on schedule again this year that we'll be on time as well. But for last year, that was the first time in a long while that had happened. It's something which we're proud of. We've also begun implementing some new processes. Accounts payable is a critical thing for any business. If someone owes you money, and you're a small businessman or a big businessman, you want to be paid. Well, the county sometimes had systems that didn't make that always happen the way it should have. So we've implemented a new process, a new system for accounts payable that generally gets in. If you're in by Friday, you'll have that check cut the next Friday, which is exactly the kind of terms that we should be operating under. The same thing is we began starting to take credit cards online. I mean, only 10, 15 years behind some, but that was something that you really couldn't do all the time with this county. So we worked on that. One of the things that had always slowed us down when you came into the audit was our fixed assets. And our fixed assets needed a lot of work. So this past year, we put a lot of effort into the fixed asset program. It required a lot of reclassifying assets from here to there, moving it around from fund to fund. And if you looked at our audit, you saw that there's a significant amount of money that had to be moved from here to there to go back several years and catch up. Well, that's fixed now. You know, our fixed asset program now is where it's supposed to be. It's in so much better shape than it was. And then in procurement, we had a successful transition as Ms. Kathy, who'd been here for many, many years, retired. And, coming in, Ms. Beaver has come in and is now moving us in a direction with all of our procedures and our policies for purchasing so that we're where we need to be and where we're going in purchasing. So we did a lot of growth in those aspects for the county of the financial management and how we operate that. Well, let's talk a little bit about that wastewater treatment plant. So, even though we were talking about a year ago, one of the most critical things that we needed was to get the approval. It used to be DHEC, now it's DES, to get approval from them so we could get a permit. Well, in order to get the permit, we had to have permission to discharge the treated sewage into the Broad River. And there are different categories of dissolved oxygen and nitrogen and things like that you had to meet the limits on. And things were kind of going along smoothly because we had to get permission from and work with all the people who already had part of the river because they were going to have to give us part of their share so that we could have a share. And things were kind of going along, we thought, well, and then about a year or so ago, a little more, DES said they're going to remodel the whole river. And that put a stop on everything while they decided to remodel the whole river. And that added about a good 12 months to the process, but then finally, earlier this year, that kind of came out of hiatus and we started moving forward again. And we're moving, we thought, in a great direction, and we kind of had agreement with Columbia and Richland County and the ones who had most of the river when, once again, DES said, maybe we need to do something different, and they slowed us and stopped us again. And at that point, it started to become a crisis because every time they stopped us, we lost time. And every time we lost time, we lost money because this wastewater treatment plant is going to be a tens and tens of $1 million investment. And every month you added to that cost. So we had to go to bat and we had to sit down and really pull some muscle. And I'm proud to say that in May, DES backed off. They not only did they agree that we were right, but they agreed to giving us our permit already as well. So we actually won that big victory because we not only got approval for what we needed to discharge, but we got their commitment to get that permit. So next week, there are going to be some meetings in Columbia with the Council of Governments that'll start that process for us to get those approvals in the river. Once they approve that, then DES will give us our permit. Then we can go and start fully designing the plant because we'll know exactly what has to go into the river. So that was a huge victory for us. Well, in addition to that, if you've been driving out towards, you might have seen people surveying. We started surveying the route that is going to carry from this part of the county all the way to the Broad River. So we've started that process, and you're talking 17 miles, so a lot of territory's got to be surveyed, and we still don't really know exactly the exact route things are going to go. But we have an idea of generally where it's going to be, and that takes time. So we started that process as well. And then we began the initial design work on the plant itself. So a company was hired to come in and design the new plant. Now, of course, Winsboro's still got their plant, and it's still going to stay there, but we need this new plant, which is going to have a permit of up to 4 million gallons. But we're probably going to start with only 2 million gallons, because that's about all we need, about all we can afford, too. So they're going to start that once they have this permission from DES. So when we get that done, in the next week or two, then we can really start designing that plant. Now, having said that, building a sewer plant takes a long time. So it's still going to be probably December of 2029 before we anticipate that plant being ready. But things are happening. That was one of the promises we made, was that things would happen. And of course, we broke ground on the Winsboro connector itself, and it's almost finished. So in about a year, we started, and now we're about done. On schedule, on time, which is one of the promises that we made. Another thing that was a huge issue for everyone in this county last year was a nuclear plant. What's going to happen? Well, of course, we don't really know. I mean, we're important to the process, but we're not the process. But again, back in December, Brookfield Management was selected to be the potential partner for Santee Cooper with these plants. And they've now been doing a significant amount of due diligence, and I'm pleased and happy to say the county's been very involved with that. They've included us, they've made sure we're sitting at the table with them. And the reason why that's important is because some years back, when the first time happened, we weren't really part of the process as much as we should have been. And we didn't have the knowledge that we should have had about where the project was and where it was going, so we didn't always make decisions in an environment of full understanding. Well, this is giving us that opportunity to really have a much better understanding of what's happening with Brookfield. And right now they're in June or so, they should be one of their key milestones as far as whether they're going to go forward with the plant. After that, they'll still have about another 12 plus months to determine those final steps. But at the end of next year, if all that goes well, they will buy those plants for about $2.7 billion. And that's the money that's already sitting in the ground. And if that happens, when that happens, then they'll start seriously building those two new plants. So that's going to be key for this county in a lot of things, in a lot of ways. And as we start getting into talk as we go through this, the rest of this fiscal year about next year's budget, is going to be information about what are we going to do to prepare for these plants and what's going to happen to this county. And so understanding that and making sure that, again, we have been part of this and we are carrying on these conversations not only with Brookfield, but with Santee Cooper and with the state of South Carolina. And so that's an element that will give us enough understanding that we'll be able to start doing the necessary planning. And the kind of planning we're going to need, well, this housing study. One of the things that it determines is the kind of housing we need, but we're going to need to adjust that because that housing plan was done before we thought these plants were coming back. So we're going to have to do some adjustments to it because if you add 5,000 workers who are going to be here for 7 years, we're going to have to deal with how we're going to manage that so that we don't end up with some of the situations we had last time. Same thing with roads. As you look at our roads, we're going to need to do traffic studies now. We can't wait 5 years to start doing the traffic studies. So we've got to plan the studies now so we can anticipate that. Same thing, what about our retail and commercial sector? If you're adding 5,000 to 7,000 people coming in to work here every day, they're going to be hungry. They're going to need and want to look for places to stay, to sleep, to eat, to buy stuff. So the county coming up with a plan that encourages our local businesses to be able to take advantage of that and working with our chamber and our towns to make sure that this time we can take advantage of all of that. So that's one of the things which and I'd say this if they weren't here, but this county council is very focused on that and making sure that we're able to this time take advantage of this opportunity. Now, assuming they go forward with this nuclear plant, which again seems to be right now everything's headed in that direction, it's looking fairly positive, you're talking an investment of another $20+ billion in this county. And that, again, as we knew last time, is going to be transformative. So starting that process now so we can anticipate what's coming and plan for it. So again, this time, whatever we do it in a way that reflects well for our citizens and protects our citizens for the long term and gives us that benefit to take advantage of that kind of a resource for many, many years. So we've already started having conversations with our technical college and our schools for workforce education and training, because they're going to have, even when the plants are being built, thousands of jobs, some of which we can train right here. Others which we'd like them to train here. Why do they have to go 40 miles away to Columbia to train if we can get them to do it here? So having those conversations as well with our educational leaders, the University of South Carolina and Clemson and SC State, our various higher education to make sure. Those of you who follow the newspaper, the nuclear company is a large nuclear, it's a nuclear research company that announced some months back that they were going to locate in Columbia and build a headquarters here. And there's some, at the time it's like, well, that's interesting. Well, now they just announced that they are going to be working with Brookfield as they work to develop this whole concept of not just nuclear plants, but everything that goes with them. So as we see that there's going to be a whole lot more going on than just nuclear plants. And again, making sure that Fairfield County is positioned in a way so we can take advantage of that. So a year ago, it was just a lot of I don't know. Let's hope. Now it's a whole lot better feeling over where we're going and what we see coming towards us. And again, the understanding that we got to act now. We can't wait 5 years to start acting. The time to act is now so that we're not left on the side of the road. And making sure that our communities are included in this. So Monticello and Jenkinsville and Winsboro and Ridgeway and everything in between is part of this conversation, so that they as well can see and reap the rewards that are going to come from what I believe is going to happen in this county. So all that kind of leads to, got out of sequence here, into the surplus properties. So when we were talking about that last year, and we ended up with about 27 different properties that we identified. And a lot of those properties are small little houses. They were tax sales. People just stopped paying taxes. There wasn't much to it. Sometimes they were just forfeited. People walked away and the county inherited. Others were the old administration building or land the county had acquired for various reasons through the years. So we came up with all those and identified. We presented that to council. Now we're in the next phase of it. We started, the first stage is completed. We've identified properties. We presented it. Now we're in the second phase of going ahead and picking those parcels out that we can just put up for auction and get that done quickly. Those that are going to be more of a proposal. Let's put out and receive proposals from developers. What would you do with this property? Tell us, give us your vision. Pointing them to our housing plan, pointing them to our strategic plan, saying, this is what we want to see in this county. Here's an opportunity for you to do something with that. Doing it that way, that gives the county council the ability to field different proposals and say, this one's going to move us better in a direction that we want to go. Then, it doesn't have to be who's paying the most. It's going to be who's going to make the biggest difference. So starting that process now, we're now in the second stage. Again, it can take a little while to do it correctly, because for those proposals, we're going to have to make sure that everything is well written and well explained to people. So we have a good scope out there. So when the businesses are looking at it, they understand exactly what we're looking for. But I've had people from Virginia call me. I've had developers just cold call me and say, we've heard there are going to be properties. How do we get on the list? So there's going to be a lot of interest in these surplus properties, of that I'm pretty sure. So again, then the strategic plan. I really dropped my sheets out of order there. So our strategic plan then is something that when we talked about, and that was again a key commitment that we made. But all these things that I've been mentioning lead to the strategic plan. It's been adopted by this council moving forward, and outcomes are now being reflected in the budget that we're discussing. So among them, there are 4 major studies that are included in the current budget that's being discussed. One is a complete review of our fire department, where we are, where we need to be, and where we want to be. And that's going to be a big plan, because when we were doing the strategic plan itself, we heard loud and clear from citizens that fire needs to be something more. And our chief and our firemen and our volunteers are doing such a great job, but they're limited. They don't have stations that are set up to serve everybody the way they'd like to. They don't necessarily have the equipment they need. There's a lot of things they don't have. And what do we want? Do we want to have 24/7 coverage? Do we want it in the whole county? Do we want it here and here? What do we really want? What can we really afford? And so that's what this plan will give us a direction. So earlier I was talking to council about fire, and I said, the current budget doesn't really allocate a lot in new stuff, because I don't know what the new stuff needs to be. This plan's going to give us that understanding of what the citizens want, what our council wants, and then put that together into a plan, and then a 2, 3, 5 year opportunity to get there. Maybe longer than that. I mean, it can take you 10 years sometimes if you're moving in a direction where you're significantly changing what you're providing or how you're providing it. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. Another one is one of our biggest assets, if not our biggest asset in economic development, is our interstate and our interchanges on the interstate. And so determining what it's going to take to get each one of those interchanges to where they are ready to go for whatever's coming in our future. And you can go towards Scout and you can see what's coming that way. But if you go north, you can see what's coming that way. So right now we know what we have, but we don't necessarily know what it's going to take to get where we need to be. So that'll tell us that. That'll say you're going to need to run 16,000 linear feet of water line to get to this one, and 13,000 of sewer to get to this one, and you're going to need to upgrade your electrical service to be this kind of electrical service. Because when developers call, they don't want us to say, yeah, we don't have that. They want us to say we don't have it, but here's what it'll take to get it. That's what they're used to hearing. And right now we can't really answer that of here's what it will take. So this study will allow us to figure that out. Another part of the plans in there is to go ahead and make sure that our land management ordinance, which we've been working on for a little while, is finished, but it's also ready to take advantage of what's coming. Because I'm telling y'all, growth is coming. And we talk about it, and that's a good thing. When I talk to our school board, they're saying we need kids because we have, schools that are getting more and more empty. We need kids in this county. We also look north and south and see it's coming. I can tell you that there's, 2 developments right now that are talking houses in the hundreds of houses in a 10-year span. Now, if you're used to hearing, Richland County or Greenville or Charleston, 200, 400, 600 houses doesn't sound like a lot. Well, you multiply that times 2.5 people, and you have 1,000, 2,000 people. In a county of 20,000 people, adding 2,000 people, the scale of it is what's coming. And it's coming. Why? Because we're easy to get to, we're close to everything, and we got land. We got gorgeous land. So this land management ordinance is going to be critical to make sure that we're ready for this so we can get growth where it needs to go, and we can encourage the protection of this county's resources, because that's one of the things that the strategic plan came through loud and clear. People want this county to stay special. They want it to stay what it's been for 200 plus years, and so it'll be that way. We have so many people in this county that their land's been in their family for generations, 150 years or longer. The same family's owned it. And it's unique, it makes us special. So we need to make sure that our ordinances support that so that we can continue being who we are. We're still going to get growth, and the corridors where growth makes sense, where you got an interstate, where you got 4-lane highways, where you got water and sewer already in the ground. So we're not going to have to go and invest a lot of money in putting things and then add traffic on roads that can't handle it. So the strategic plan has covered all those aspects to it. And then part of that, though, is giving y'all an understanding of where we are. I guess that's one of the big problems with government, is government talks and government promises. But does government deliver? And, I ain't perfect. Sometimes I try and I don't make it. But the commitment is that we will do everything we can. So having dashboards that are actually there, that you can pull up and see, well, the county said in the first quarter, this is what they're going to do. What have they done? And managing that dashboard so that going forward, citizens can see and track us and get an idea. That was one of the things the council made clear. They want you to understand where we are, where we're going, and if we fall behind, why? Because sometimes you're going to fall behind. There's nothing wrong in falling behind, but don't cover it up. Make sure people know and they understand that. So having those dashboards is a critical part to having a good plan. And when I first talked to this council about coming here, I made it clear, to me, planning is critical. Not for the sake of planning, but for the sake of understanding where you got to go so your budgets and your staff and everything work in tandem to accomplish goals and outcomes. There's the old saying that, without a vision, the people are lost. And so we need that vision. We need to know where we're going. And that's one of the things that this dashboard will allow us to do. Another one of the studies which I glossed over, I didn't mean to, is a CIP, a capital improvement plan. And as again, the council earlier was hearing some of the things that are coming down. Sheriff was talking about the need for radios. That's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for radios that we're going to have to get. And right now we don't really have a good capital improvement plan, so we can look down the road 5 years and see, what do we need in 5 years? What do we need in 10 years? How long do roofs last? How long do HVAC systems last? Cars, trucks, vehicles, radios, guns, all capital assets have a limited life. So coming up with a capital improvement plan allows us to budget accordingly, because we can see, all right, guys, we got this coming forward in 3 years. It's going to be end of life. And we don't want to be caught by surprise, which too many times in the past that's happened. We've been caught by surprise by something. I mean, people knew it, but it just never got in front to the point of that. So that's the other ingredient that we're going to be doing, is creating a CIP that'll then give us that ability. And then we can say, okay, well, if we're going to do that then we probably shouldn't do this now. We're going to need to adjust accordingly so we got the resources necessary to do that. So as we look at all that, then that gets into the budget itself. And the budget is the tool. So everything else kind of talks about what we want to do, what we need to do, what we've been doing. And now we're into the budget itself. And so we had our second work session today. We'll have at least one more work session. We've got second reading on, I guess, June the 8th. And then June 22nd is third reading, is the way the schedule goes. So we've got still, weeks ahead of us. But what the budget does is it's going to continue investing, again, those resources that our citizens have trusted us with in our capital assets. So we don't have to worry about deputies breaking down in the middle of nowhere. Fire trucks that throw a rod and then they're stuck up on jacks for 18 months because you can't find anybody who can fix a fire truck. Things like that we've been dealing with. So we look at new ambulance, new fire trucks, again, new sheriff's vehicles. This is something that every year we need to be doing. We need to be buying vehicles every year because they have a finite life. A sheriff's vehicle normally is going to be good for about 150,000 miles because they ride them hard. An ambulance, maybe about 5 years. Fire truck, maybe about 20 years. So they've all got a finite life, though. The problem is we've got fire trucks from 1989. We've got ambulances with 350,000 miles on them. We've got sheriff's vehicles that had over 200. We pushed that part back, so our sheriff's vehicles aren't in the 200,000 range anymore, but we've still got other issues. So this budget continues working towards that. It doesn't solve any of the problems are still there, but we're whittling away at it every year now. It's kind of the intention of the plan. Also, one of the issues that we're having to deal with is keeping good people and attracting them to this county. And, unfortunately, it came up again today that we have turnover. We lose people to higher salaries or better opportunities. And it's something that's a struggle. So this budget starts trying to address that in the creation of retention programs, but also of development, professional development programs. And one of the things we really haven't done a very good job is recognizing our good employees. So we're looking to try to get that started in this, and it takes a while. You can't do it in 6 months and be done. It takes a couple of years to really create a good, robust recruitment, retention, and development program. But we're looking to start doing that this year as well. Also, as I was talking about with land management and all that, we do make investments in community development, our planning and zoning. Why? Because that's what's going to make sure that what comes in is managed correctly. They follow the rules. They do what they're supposed to. They don't slip in something that we didn't see. So we look to invest in building inspectors. If you're going to be building hundreds of houses, someone's got to inspect those. Right now, we don't really have the ability to do as many as we should. So we're having to bring people in as third-party vendors to do it for us. So we're trying to address that. So we've got the necessary competencies on our staff in order to do that. Again, I already mentioned about the fire plan, and those are going to be so critical, and y'all need to be part of that. And all the citizens need to, what do you want in fire? Now, and this is where you start getting into that rural versus urban kind of a conversation. I moved into the country and I want to live there and I don't want this. And some, but I want to have someone who returns my call if my house is on fire. And so there's a dichotomy of where's that fine line? And the citizens have to have that conversation. Where is that line? Where do we draw the line between 24/7 fire and an ambulance that's going to be 6 minutes away versus A, what it costs, and B, what that actually looks in a county of almost 750 square miles. It's awful hard to cover territory of that distance. And we've only got 6 EMS stations and 11 fire stations, 15 fire stations, of which those are pretty much all volunteer. So in order to move to a 24/7 fire, none of our stations can sleep anyone. We don't have bathrooms, showers. We don't have co-ed dormitories for male and female. Those are all things we're going to have to do. We're going to have to create those if we're going to go in that direction. So those are the conversations we're going to have with our citizens. It's just, what do we want? What kind of a fire service do we want for this county? So that's a big part of it. And then we invest in our recreation facilities as well, and our programs. That's critical to the quality of life, is those kind of programs. So we're putting money into renovating the Boykin Center, painting it and doing some work to it, because it's not a very attractive when you're driving into Winsboro, and that's the first thing you see from that direction. Working on tennis and pickleball courts to upgrade them, not to really to where they should be, because we didn't do a great job maintaining them. And further looking at what we can do, but also the programs we're offering. Mr. Vance, our director, was talking earlier, and we had some great comments and kudos to him for the team he has with him. And it is a great team, and they do such great things, but we want to do more. There's so much more we can do. And as we look to have, if you want to have young families come in, we got to have programs for kids. That's kind of the definition of a young family, is they have kids. And here's a statistic that should be very sobering to everybody here. In the 2010 census, the average age in Fairfield County was 37 years old. 2020 census, it was 47 years old. In 10 years, the average age went up that much. And that does not bode well for a community's future. It just doesn't, because what we're doing is it means, first of all, we're losing our kids. So as kids graduate high school, they look around, do they have any place to live? Do they have a job? Do they want to live here? Do we give them those opportunities and those reasons to stay here? If you're looking to move here, I've got 3 kids, 28, 28, and 30. They wouldn't want to move here. I mean, they like visiting me, but as far as that, there's nothing here for someone like that to move to town. So having programs like that, good recreation departments that will give families something to do, fun stuff to do. That's one thing I'm proud. It's like, it'll be in next month, but one of the things that we're doing that I think is going to be so cool for the 250th is we're doing a drone show. It's going to be over the clock tower. It's going to be as part of the Chamber's concert that night, the Patriotic Drone Show. We're going to be the only county in the region doing that. If you've ever seen a drone show, they're amazing. They're so much fun and they're so cool to watch. We're going to be doing that. And those are the kind of cool things that people will start hearing about and coming. We just did the 250th. What a neat event that was, okay? And how special was that to see? And again, our museum and our chamber working so well together. Then we had the Blair Day out there. Again, what a great event that was, and pulling people together. And there's the car show coming up in not this weekend, but next weekend downtown. So there's so many cool things that are happening here, and that's what people will start remembering. So investing in our recreation facilities and programs is a very key and critical thing for where we need to be and where we need to be going. So, having said all that, we still got challenges ahead of us, and so that's one of the things I've said. Attracting and retaining staff, that's hard. That is tough, because getting someone in their 20s and 30s, first of all, is always going to be a little harder for us than, say, Columbia or Charlotte or Atlanta or Charleston or Greenville. But then we're also competing with surrounding municipalities that just pay more. And if you're in your 20s, money talks. Money makes a difference. And if they can make $4,000 a year somewhere else, they're maybe going to go there. So we've got to do a better job of attracting and retaining those staff. And that's not a new problem. Didn't come in the last year. It's been a problem for a long time here, and it's going to be a problem. And at some point, you always have to say, this is the line. We're never going to win a bidding war with Rock Hill. I'll tell you that right now. We just won't, and we can't try to win that bidding war. But what we can do is try to create a community and environment and pay them well enough to do that. Again, another challenge, after 20 years of not growing, to suddenly start growing, that's a challenge because we're really not used to growing. And we're not used to what comes with growth. But if you add a subdivision with 600 houses, suddenly traffic's an issue. And traffic right now, people, if you go anywhere else, of course, we know how bad traffic can be. And it's not here yet, but suddenly it could be. So we've got to kind of plan for that. How are we going to deal with that? Again, managing the nuclear process. Right now, things are going well, but we've got the potential of 10 plus years ahead of us and making sure that this is managed for our benefit this time. Because last time we were an afterthought, and making sure that we're front and center as much as is appropriate and needed so that we can be part of that conversation. Again, as I mentioned, we're an aging county. Nothing wrong with that. I'm aging too. But that's not what counties need to be successful. There's an old saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. And that's reality. If this county isn't growing, but in both population as well as age, then we're not going the right direction. One of the first counties I served was a dying county, Abbeville County, and shrinking. And to the point that year, that budget, only one department in the whole county's budget grew. That was probate, because of all the people dying. The only county budget that grew that year was probate. So a rapidly aging county is not good. But the same part, going back to planning growth, well, let's attract 55 plus communities. Those are great. They don't put kids in schools. Of course, we've got empty schools. We need kids at least for a while in our schools. 55 plus communities add challenges we don't have. Ambulances, they need a lot of them. Fire, they need a lot of them. They want a lot more law enforcement. Again, I've had a county where I dealt with that. And we thought it was going to be great until the EMS calls tripled in 3 years. because of all the calls. Slip and falls were one of the biggest things that we had to deal with in that county. So, it's one of those, be careful what we ask for. So let's make sure as we look at an aging county, what we're able to do. Again, attracting industry is a challenge because you might have a great year this year, but you can't stop next year. You got to constantly be working towards that. And sometimes it takes a couple of years. We've actually had a good year so far, and I think we're going to have a really good year coming up because we have people looking at us because of what we have in our county. What we have is assets that you can't buy. We've got an interstate, we got location, and we got land. Okay? Those are three of the things that are hardest to come by, and we've got all that. So making sure we keep attracting industry, because that's what's going to get people to move here. That's what's going to make sure that our kids, when they graduate, if they want to stay, they can get a good job. Now, I know some people said, yeah, but what about Mack trucks? Well, I think South Carolina learned an awful lot since then. I think we've learned a lot as well, how you attract industry. You can look at the people that we've got. Right now, the companies that are here are good companies. And Lily's been here for over 10 years, and they're doing well. Same thing with Bomag, 10 years, doing well. Attracting the right kind of industry is going to be important to us. So making sure that we keep working towards that, And again, retail and commercial. When people come, I don't think anybody really likes driving down to Columbia to go shopping. So the more opportunities when we ask people, what do you want? Well, of course, top of the list is always Cracker Barrel. And then second on the list is Publix. But, what do you really want is they want restaurants, they want shops, they want reasons to stay here. And again, working with our chamber is something that we need to do, working with the towns to help them attract, because the county's job is really to attract industry. It's not our job to attract commercial retail, but we can do things to encourage it and support it. But that's something which really the state didn't set us up with that in mind. So they don't encourage us to get involved, but we're going to have to support it if it's going to happen. And again, as we keep saying, but maintaining this rural feel and maintaining who we are that makes us special is going to be important, because developers come in and they start seeing multiple tracts of land in the thousands of acres. And we start getting sewer lines. That's going to make it real attractive, especially, folks in the western part of the county. We got to be aware of that, because you're not that far from Irmo, you're not that far from Chapin and Lexington, and nobody wants to live in Lexington these days. So there's, 20 minutes, I can be in Fairfield County. So that's something which we've got to be prepared for and zone correctly and appropriately, so we don't suddenly have a bunch of, quarter-acre mini farms popping up all over the western part of the county. And then finally, aging infrastructure. We're starting to address that, but some of our roads are in terrible shape, and the state can't figure it out. They kind of punted that again this year, as far as things like that are concerned. Again, the town of Winsboro and Ridgeway, their infrastructure, their water and sewer, they're old. They're very old, and something's going to need to happen with them as well. The county and the regional sewer and water are putting in a lot of money, into sewer lines, which will be good. But there's so much other infrastructure, even buildings like this. This is public infrastructure, and a lot of money's been spent on it. It's still not done. We got another building that's sitting empty that we hope to sell, and somebody else can turn it into it. But we didn't maintain that. So making sure that we maintain our infrastructure is going to be important to us. So those are challenges that are ahead of us, and kind of with that, that's just kind of the update for everything. I just, like I said, wanted to talk to y'all. And are there any kind of questions y'all might have or anything that I can help you with, or some of the staff here can help as well? Yes, sir.
I think this was a very informative meeting, and thank you for having it. I believe it's our 7th town hall we've had in just a few short months, and that's a lifetime record for the county, so great job with that. But I would add to the communication piece. I think we need to understand only communicating this type of information, basically, for having these meetings, is basically through Facebook. And in a digitally challenged community, that's not really an effective avenue. And we need to start thinking more about using, we have an award-winning local newspaper that can at any time blanket every household in the county. And looking at the turnout tonight, I attended several of the previous town halls. We're not getting these kind of messages out to the people. This was a great presentation tonight, a lot of good information, but we need to do a better job of channeling that information to the entire community.
Agreed. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I like the proactive stance. I really appreciate it. Very informative. I do have a question I'd like to drill down on.
Sure.
The new industrial park at Beach Road.
Yeah.
Can you kind of give some background and
Sure.
how that came about without?
No, absolutely. In fact, I should have mentioned that. I'm sorry I didn't. So, of course, the county's current industrial park where BOMAG is located and on Peach Road, that's about filled up. We just got Mega Metal in there. They're working on it. We've only got 2 parcels left in that side of it. But just down the road from there, the county has now acquired over 400 acres of land, which is now going to be our new industrial park. And it's further down Peach Road from the current park. And it was basically a collaboration between Fairfield Electric Co-op, the state of South Carolina, and Fairfield County to purchase this land. And then now we're going to start laying it out in master plans so we know how many sites we can put in there. And that's probably our next 10 years of industrial parks. We have land elsewhere too, but generally, you want to have larger ability to cluster people. And so having a new park is good for our future. So that's something right now. In fact, you'll start seeing, we started clearing some of the land in order to put an entrance into it. So in the next 6 months, you'll probably see the entrance getting built into that park. And then we'll go ahead and finish the master planning out of where the utilities have to go and what it's going to take to get it ready. So then when we finish filling up the other parks, we'll be ready to go with that one.
If I could,
Sure.
It's not very popular with those that live on Beach Road.
Yes, sir.
And you say we're about empty on the BOMAG. We've got that Cook Road entrance that has never been fixed, and there are many more parcels in there that could be used before we kind of shift gears and go down along a road that, first of all, it's not state supported. It's a very narrow road. Conflicting with the EMS station there, which is right there before you get to the flashing light. I think it was well thought out.
Well, and to your point, there's a lot of water under that bridge, so to speak, in that respect, as far as that park is concerned. The reason why we focused on this one is we had already started down a road of that one of where the money was being secured to buy the land. So we bought the land while we could because it was state money, and that was what it was for. But that part of it, I've had the discussions with Ms. Broadwater, Economic Development Director, of let's come up with a plan for that part of it. Those bridges right now, the cost to get those bridges fixed is in the many millions of dollars. So is it better to come up with a new entrance on the other side off Cook Road and make that as a separate park? We're having to work with Commerce on that to kind of get their thoughts and their process on that. But no, your point that is land the county has, and it needs to be something developed as well. And it's not got all the utilities it needs, but again, it's in a position where it could. Zap, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I kind of piggyback on what he said about the communication, getting out to the citizens. I know that most of us have a smartphone. I don't know what our technology guru is with the county, but having an app, just having an app that's the Fairfield County app would help a lot. And the other one that like Sharon and I talked about is just the old-fashioned mailers.
Yes, sir.
Because if citizens had something that they haven't, like all the surveys that you guys did, that was a great thing, but a lot of citizens didn't know about it. And if we had, I know it's expensive, but mailers to get feedback from the citizens, I think really, and that's the buy-in too for us to develop. Is getting the citizens involved.
And in a rural county such as this, an older county such as this, places where cell phones don't always even work, such as this, that is critical and that is important. That's something which at our next work session, we're going to be talking about some of the digital recommendations we're making, first of all, to try to start using, first of all, cell phones and things like that better, the websites, creating those kinds of mechanisms that citizens can get, even text alerts. If you want to get a text alert on this, that, there's a menu of 30 things, you click this, this, and this, and you'll get text alerts on those. But also to the point of just old-fashioned hard stuff you feel. A lot of people want to read something, they want to hold something. It's expensive. It's actually a lot more expensive because, in my mind, stamps are still a quarter. And even bulk mailing, it's still a cost to that. And that's part of the conversations that staff has to have with the council is where do we go and how much do we do that? I'm old enough that I check my mailbox every day. My kids might check their mailbox once a month. And it's like, that's just the world they live in. Of course, then they miss stuff. And it's like, well, I told you, dad normally knows best. But, that is the world is there's a real divide somewhere, where older folks like us, or some of us, not all older, still like that hard paper, don't want to read it and will read it. So trying to incorporate that, but that's not something we have really done to that degree. And certainly other ways of communicating through newspapers and all that is something that, the county needs still to be looking at. But to your point, yeah, exactly. We got to do better. We do. Is that a nose or is that? I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us like an update on the utility issue at the original industrial park? I think at one of the council meetings you said it was going to be like $1 million to get it up there.
Oh, okay. So that was, I'm thinking you're talking about the conduit that we had to run. And that conduit got run, got taken care of, everything is, and that's where Mega Metal is here because of that. So that was an issue where as we got into that, we realized that we built the park, but we didn't run the electricity to the degree we needed to or where it needed to go. So we had to go in after the facts and fix that. So, but that did get done, and it goes back a long time. So, it was probably, when all said and done, a county issue. It just wasn't scoped out correctly, and things were cut to save money, and that was probably something that was cut because we could do it later, and so we ran it this far in, but didn't run it all the way in. So, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
When you talked about recreation, this thought came to me. The pool at Fortune Spring, is that town or county?
That's county. So that's our pool.
Okay, so
Your pool.
why is it? Why don't we use it?
Well, last year there was a couple issues why it didn't get used last year. One was it had some major leaks that had to get repaired. The other was lifeguards. Getting enough lifeguards, keep it open. We're required to have a certain number of lifeguards for that size, and that was something we struggled with last year. Well, this year the pool's been totally fixed, and we have the lifeguards, so it's going to be opening, I guess this coming weekend, or the first weekend in June, it will be open. And yes, ma'am. And so, as we talk about the long term for the pool, we're looking at what needs to be done to kind of elevate it, maybe with a splash pad or something that would attract some younger kids that don't want to be in a big pool with big kids, and some things like that. What would that look like? What would it cost? How would we do something like that? And also, just talking with the school district about, well, if we had basically a bubble, but so you could have almost year round, then they could use it for swim lessons, they could use it for swim teams, and the school district's interested in talking to us as well. And that's not unusual for the county and the schools to collaborate on a pool because, generally speaking, third graders, I think we used to do it maybe in this county where we taught them lessons. And every third grader needs to know how to swim. And so that's one of the things. Now that's not a 1 year or 2 year. That's a longer term kind of a vision. But we're looking at that pool as a long term asset for this county, and how can we make sure to take advantage of it for that purpose?
Are you promoting that it's open?
Well, I hope so. Okay, we're supposed to be. So I can follow up on that.
How are you promoting?
I'll have to. I wish I knew everything that was, but I can find out how we promoted it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I think that it's a good idea to hear what your plans are for land management and all of those kinds of things, and kind of coordinating the development as it comes. I would hope that there is an additional focus on the western part of Fairfield County. When you take a look at the number of employees that are possibly coming here, if you take a look at what counts as housing in that area right now, it's pretty much, the parks where, you park a trailer or those kinds of things. So basically that's what's there. And hopefully that there may be some creative ways that you can take a look at providing additional housing there. You still have the lake properties and all of those kinds of things that are probably going to need some infrastructure. And whether that's in a long-term plan or what, I think that it needs to be looked at. In some areas, they've talked about someone coming in, such as the companies that we're talking about with AI and other kinds of things, needing additional electricity as well as water, and whether or not that's on our radar. And if so, they're going to be looking at lots of land and other kinds of things. And again, you're taking a look at, while they don't take a whole lot of employees, but around that area. So I'm just asking that you take a look at that becomes a part of the plan, because I think that's where a lot of opportunity lies.
And that actually has been part of the conversations we've been having with Brookfield and Santee Cooper, is as we look at this, and I think, it's not a secret that, Dominion has nothing to do with these plants. And Santee Cooper is divested. It's all private money buying these plants, which is good in the sense that it's not going to show up on anybody's power bill because we're not paying for it like we did the first go around. But that means it's their power to sell who they want it to, so it doesn't automatically go into Dominion or Fairfield Electric's or Santee Cooper's grid. It goes into where they want it. So we've been having conversations just to make sure that, again, this is still early, but it's where we need to be, that as they look at what they're going to do, and they got a lot of land out there that they own, not counting all the other land that's around there, to have those discussions on, well, you're going to have to house people somewhere. And so they've already identified some people. We've met and talked with some of them even about, how are you going to do this? How are you going to have housing that's not going to degrade this county, that's not going to impact this county, that's not going to lower property values all the way around it, so that we're protected and we're whole by this? And this is something which we will fight you on if you don't make sure that we're part of this, so it's a good outcome. But also the cost of water and sewer, because we can't afford that. And they're going to have to pick up that cost and make sure they understand that it's great if we build a new wastewater treatment plant on the Broad River, but that's not in Monticello or Jenkinsville. So if you want that there, you're going to have to run 11 miles of sewer line at your cost. Think of this. And so that's the conversations we're having, so they don't suddenly come up and try to put us in a corner. So we are trying to make sure that all this is in front of us this time. One of the sets of conversations I had is I reached out to my counterpart in Georgia where Plant Vogtle was built. And we've had conversations over, what do you wish you knew then that you know now? So we could try to learn as well. They had some very insightful thoughts of things that when we got into this, and some stuff that we never thought about, even, thinking we knew, they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. So we are really trying to make sure that part of it is, at least we're doing everything we can to do it. And in Columbia, there's decisions being made that, so far they seem to be taking a fairly reasoned approach into managing things like that, so the counties still have say-so in land use. So the state, at one point, someone wanted to take land use away from the county, so the state would control things like that. But they've kind of backed away from that. Yes, sir.
Two things, talking amongst people. We're, as citizens, we're concerned about keeping the integrity of the farming. Mm-hmm. And I know this is something that's not just the county's responsibility, but a relationship with agriculture for the state being the number one business. I mean, we have a real pride in our county to support our farmers. And when we talk about development, I think it's really important that development doesn't crouch and take over farm. Very good farming here that's happening. And we need to promote it, but that's not necessarily county, like I said, that's a state thing, I think. And then the other one is preservation of our buildings. I mean, there's so many people. There's historic buildings that it costs to maintain and upgrade, and
Pelham knows.
I'm not sure how we address that as a county. I know that's part of the town responsibility, but
Well, and so one of the things that, again, I probably should have put it up there is the council approved from our side passage of the Bailey Bill. And the Bailey Bill is state legislation that basically encourages people to invest in historic older buildings. And it lets them freeze their property taxes at the value prior to investment, and then keep it for like 5-10 years. In our case, I think 10 years is what we came up with. And we have to work with the town of Winnsboro because the vast majority are going to be in the town of Winnsboro that are going to be redeveloped for anything. And if you've checked the town of Winnsboro, the mayor's been putting out lately trying to get people to sign up for the historic preservation. Well, that's part of this, because those buildings have to go in front of that historic preservation committee to be determined, are you historic? And if you are and they say yes, well, the county's already said, if you say yes, we're going to go forward with it. And they have authority to do it in the county because we've given them that ability to do that for us. So we don't create a whole new commission and a whole new panel when most of the building's going to be here. So that's one of the proactive steps that the council has taken, is doing that. So, and you know, on agriculture, you might have seen that the General Assembly just passed on farm stands that basically makes all roadside markets exempt from stormwater and regulations like that. So, you know, if you're growing some corn, cucumber, whatever, and you just want to sell them out front, you can do that and not have to worry about the government coming in saying you don't have a permit. You can't do that. So that does pass Monday or Friday or Thursday last week. Yes, sir?
Just a suggestion, we referenced Fairfield's digital capacity several times tonight in different conversations. And it's in the strategic plan. However, the key partners are not listed as key partners, and we need to do that, and that's our state delegation. The state broadband office right now is 2 years behind in mapping, so they don't really have any clue where we stand in broadband. And it's going to take our state delegation to emphasize, to get the state broadband office up to speed so that Fairfield County can get up to speed, because we don't really know where we need.
You know, about 5 or 6 years ago, that was like a burning issue, and things were happening, and things were going fast, and we were leading the country at one point, or close to it, with the mapping and where we were, and now it seems like it's kind of lost focus. Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be quite the issue it was some years back. We tried the delegation. That's got to come from the top down. There's really nothing we can do.
Just in the plan, we need to add them as part of it.
Okay, yes, sir. Well, and to your point, I didn't say, but one thing about a plan that makes it actual good is this plan's got to get reviewed on a regular basis and updated as needed. So council looks and says, you know, this was important 2 years ago, but something else has come up, so let's kind of move our priorities. So that's one part of a good planning process, is that you evaluate on a regular basis and you adjust as necessary. Yes, sir.
One thing I might recommend is, right now Starlink is acceptable for many military applications, so I'm sure there's a commercial outlet there for the county communication. But that was just kind of an add-on to jump in here. My real point is AI. I would like the county to approach that with great caution, because there's things that come out historically throughout the country. One is the water tables have been affected because a significant amount of used for cooling. And then the promises of all the jobs. Well, once they create the AI facility, and now they're talking about making that a national security place, the staffing for that is very small. So you're not going to get a big influx of permanent kind of jobs that you really
I mean, AI is data centers aren't going to create for us any kind of job economy. You're right. You know, a data center might have 20 or 30 jobs. Now they're well paying, very well paying, but it's not a huge quantity of it. Generally, for a locality like us, the impact comes from the taxes they pay, especially because the state of South Carolina is kind of coming into alignment that it looks like they won't let any incentives be given to data centers. So if they come in, they got to pay full everything. No fee and lieu, no cuts, no anything. So that's generally where localities get involved. Now, Senator Davis out of Beaufort has been very active in Columbia on this issue too, and trying to make sure that localities still maintain that ability to have that final say over, you know, do we want this or not, versus some overarching entity in Columbia saying that, yes, if you do this, this, and this, you can automatically go in. That's still unresolved in Columbia. So that's a conversation you need to have with the General Assembly, because there were some who wanted to take that away from us. And they would say, if you did this, 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 and this, it doesn't matter what the county said or the city said, you'd be able to build there. So that's still, and they've kind of stopped for the year, I guess. But it'll pop back up next year.
One of your issues, I hate to switch gears to the fire issue you have right now, 24/7 kind of. The previous place that worked very nicely is the people coming into the developments. That's part of the cost. So you're talking down the sidewalks, fire stations, police stations, stoplights. They all got to figure out how to pay for that. And sometimes it's passed on to the citizens for like a 20-year time frame, and the people that first buy in there. But sometimes it's just the developers will upfront the cost.
Well, and we've had some conversations, but we haven't gotten into it neck deep yet, is impact fees. And basically, you know, the state has a process you have to go through for impact fees. So you've got to do a pretty in-depth study. We can't just say, you're going to pay me X thousand dollars. You have to do a study, determines what that actually is and the cost is. But then once you have that and it's approved and it's ratified, then that's added to the cost of the new house. And it, you know, might be, you know, $3,000 for fire and $2,000 for sheriff and for EMS and parks and rec and libraries or schools, whatever you're allowed to do that. So that's something which more and more communities are doing. And it's funny, you know, 10 years ago, impact fees were a bad word because that was government cracking down on the little man. But now all of a sudden people got cracked down on too hard by development that they had to pay for. So now there's a lot more support locality-wise for impact fees, because that shifts, at least in theory, a lot of the cost off of the people who live here onto the people who don't, who are moving in but will take advantage of all those services. Also, in development agreements with the developers, and, you know, saying, all right, well, you know, you want to develop 200 acres. Well, you know, as part of that conversation, let's make sure that we've got land for a school, or we've got land for a fire EMS station, land for a park, whatever the need is, and getting that as part of that conversation too. So up front, they go ahead and set it aside, and they build their community to support it, so that you got the necessary roads and sidewalks and things like that for whatever it is. And
Those with interest, are they smaller developers, or do you have some master plan developers?
we have yet to have any of the huge ones, the Pulte's, the things like that, but they're coming. They're coming. I mean, no one has yet told us that, but you just look and see where we are and see how close Charlotte is getting to us. And it's, you know, and once we get water and sewer where they can access it, then yeah, it's coming, so. All right, well, guys, I'll be around. It's 7 o'clock, though. We always try to keep these things in a reasonable amount of time. So I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
My idea, we were talking about agriculture, the farmer's market is a source of a lot of people's concern. It's part of downtown too. Downtown should maybe be a part of some sort of development like that. That brings tourism, which is economic development too.
I mean, we've had conversations. That's something where I think the county and the town have to work closely together, because it's the town. And so I think the council's very ready for it. I think the town is ready to talk, but we just have to really decide, because some of that I think the town rightfully should lead the way in, and the county can support and be part of it. You know, and be so. But those are definitely something which, man, a great farmers market adds so much to a downtown. It really does. And yeah, no question. Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to thank you for really coming before the citizens of Fairfield County. I wish more were here, but, you know, to really discuss the kinds of things. And I'm hoping that maybe at least quarterly or something, that something like this would be held, and we would certainly advertise it a lot more to get people here.
And you can always, if you invite me to church groups, whatever, any group, if you just let me know, I'll come out. I'm going tomorrow to talk to the senior center at lunch. So if you've ever got a group or gathering that, you know, I'd be glad to come out and talk with you as well. So that's always an option and opportunity for you. Well, guys, thank you. Again, I'll be around. Members of council are here too if you got questions.